Welcome to this episode of Family by Design. On this particular episode, we're going to jump into consequence versus punishment. And this is a mindset, so you're going to want to tune in and take notes and just be very encouraged as you listen.
We ended the last episode and we talked about, and you asked the question.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like you have as good of an answer as I do about this, but what's the difference between like a consequence versus a punishment? And I think the biggest thing is that, from the outside, it could look the same.
Yeah.
But the motivation and the instruction behind it is different. And the end goal with it is different. Typically, people punish as a way to pay back for the wrong they did.
Yes.
And that
is like
that's not what we want.
Right, because that's a world system. We see that in the world. If you commit a crime, you have a punishment.
Yeah.
Which is prison or whatever. And then in prison, there is more punishment.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
and we're not trying to imprison or make prisoners. We're trying to.
But you could also say like, okay, well, you got, a speeding ticket going way too fast. So not only got to pay a fine, but you got to do community service.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes our kids do quote community service.
Right.
So it could look very, very similar, but the goal isn't you did this. No, I'm going to do this to you.
Right.
That's not even in the makeup, but it could look like that because if you go and you spank a child, and I could not stress this enough, you only spank a child because of disobedience, because disobedience is because of rebellion. That's the only reason. It's to drive rebellion out of them. That's why you do it.
Not because you're angry at them.
Not because you're angry, and not because they need to. You did this. You hit your brother. Now I'm going to hit you. Like right. That's not it. It's to deal with the rebellion. That's it. That's it. There are. It's so simple. There's no other reason to ever spank a child,
and not to invoke fear in them either.
Right. Although, so I'm trying to balance this because let me go back to a couple things. So the fear thing, they should be afraid of an object. Right.
Okay.
Tied to the consequence. But they shouldn't be like afraid of you. Like I have to go like, whatever, you're beating me, whatever, not that kind of thing. Okay. But then also when it comes to, what it looks like, it could look like they're being punished. They might even feel like they're being punished. They might even feel some shame, and we don't believe shame's a good thing, but sometimes shame can work when a kid feels like, oh man, I feel really bad and embarrassed about that. We don't want them to stay there, but for the moment it might be okay. Because if they did something really heinous, they go and, pull some kid's pants down or I don't know, whatever the things that we've seen kids do, like, and then they get embarrassed about that and maybe deal with a little guilt and shame for a moment. Because the Apostle Paul actually talks about dealing with people in the church. In one instance, he said that shame would come upon them to bring them to a place to change. So there can be room for that, but the goal isn't to bring people into shame. The goal isn't to bring our kids into shame. But our goal is always to drive out the rebellion. People have to understand that that's the number one goal with disciplining your children. So it's not to punish them. And a punishment mentality, again, it's to say, I'm going to pay back for what you did. That was wrong. Versus a consequence is, if you do this, this is going to be what happens. And you could have a spanking be the result, whether it's a consequence or a punishment. But again, you're part of training a child isn't just to discipline them, but it's also to teach them, to instruct them. So if you're teaching your kid, I'm going to pay you back for what you did, that's not love. Right. That's not grace.
Right.
That's not how this is supposed to work. But if you teach your kid that I'm going to see to it that you have consequences that come for your actions. You have just taught them a life lesson that if I do stuff that I'm not supposed to do, I'm going to have things happen to me that I don't want to have happen to me. No child wants to have their butt beat. No child wants to have a spanking. But when they know that that's the consequence for what has taken place, then it's going to cause them to deter and want to do something different. And when they're really young, kids will feel like it's coming from you because you're the one literally taking the spatula or the wooden paddle that you cut with the jigsaw out in the shed. Not speaking from experience or anything. They're going to look at it and they're going to think that that's you. You're doing this to me. And it's like, no, I'm doing this for you because I love you. And if I allow you to keep operating in rebellion and I don't address it, and you keep disobeying me and I don't address it, I'm not a good dad. I'm not a good mom. I'm not a good parent.
So not addressing rebellion, we can equivalent to not being a good parent.
Absolutely. I read this verse, I think it was on the last episode, but it says that whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. So it actually ties discipline and using the rod of correction. And I've heard people say lots of things about, the rod of correction is it's just saying, you're wrong. I've been around long enough and I've seen too many people that have tried to come up with a different way of disciplining their children than spanking them when they're little but at the right age. I've seen too many people with really terrible fruit. Kids are out of control. They don't listen. They hit other kids. They spit on people. They bite people. They yell. They cuss. They do all the things that you don't want a kid to do. And in the back, you got parents going, we don't believe in spanking our children. Okay, great. You're smarter than God now.
Yeah.
That's really what you're saying. I know better than God. No, you don't know better than God. God knows what a kid needs. But the motivation behind all of it, it's never anger. It's never, I'm going to punish you. It's never, you deserve this. It's never, you're frustrating me. It's never any of that.
Right.
It is always, this is for your benefit. This is because you have to learn to follow instructions because it's going to save your life.
Right.
And again, I go back to, 10 years ago, I didn't have the fruit. We didn't have the fruit of this to speak of. We do now. So for people that would try to argue with us about like, you shouldn't spank your children, you're barking up the wrong tree. We already see the fruit of it. And I think people are scared to spank their children because they think it's abuse. And that's because the world has, now there are people that will quote spank their kids and they do abuse their kids. That does happen. Most of these people that are given information about how to raise kids, they don't even have a clue because they don't have kids themselves, a lot of them, right? And so it's not abusive to spank your child. It's abusive to spank them incorrectly.
Right, which we're going to get into on a whole other episode, but this episode specifically is about consequence and punishment.
Yeah.
And so basically consequence versus punishment is really the motivation behind why you're doing what it is that you're doing. So this is a great discussion that you should be having before you're married. You're having with the Lord and you're continuing to have with your spouse.
Yeah.
And that you're on the same page and that it's very solidified before you even start having kids. Now, if you've had kids and you're still in the young phase, seek counsel.
Oh my gosh.
Ask
it's
people who have good fruit.
It's only pride that would cause you to be pulling your hair out with kids. And then on the next aisle over, you have a family that is enjoying their children. And for you not to say, can you help me? I mean, listen, if you need to grow in this area, you need to grow in this area. But this is so dire because if you don't raise your kids and get and deal with the foolishness that's bound, it says that foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. It is tied to foolishness and rebellion are tied. They're bound in your child's heart. That's really strong language, but it's 100% true. Who's going to deal with it? You as the parent. How are you going to deal with it? If you have a 2-year-old that is strong-willed and out of control, and you think you're going to reason with them, you need a spanking. Like you're out of your mind. You have to take things that the Bible teaches. The Bible instructs us to spank our children. I just feel like that needs to set in for a minute because I have met, now I know more parents that are believers that are Christians that do spank their kids and believe in it than don't. But there is a growing trend of people that are like, oh, we're not into that. We're going to whatever. We're just going to love our kids. It literally says that if you don't spank, some translations say beat your kid. And this isn't talking about you don't ever hit him in the face. You don't do abusive things like that. God gave patting on the backside, and we use proper instruments that inflict enough pain for them to feel the consequence to know that what they're doing is rebellion, it's disobedience, and they can't continue to do it, or they're going to face the consequence again. There's a right way to do this thing. But if you don't love your child, then you will not spank them.
Well, and then people, I know what
you don't love your kid.
Right. And so okay, there has to be a balance to all this too, because I just think about people say like, I do love my kids. Yes. And because I love them, I'm not going to punish them in the form of spanking them because it wasn't done right to me, and now I resent my parents for doing it, and I don't have a good relationship. And so I think like there's all these things in our even psyche that like we don't realize why it is that we're doing what we're doing, and then we're trying to navigate, is this right, is this wrong? And maybe even some people say like this is right for you, but it's not right for me.
Right. And
my kids, they don't need to be, they don't need this. It doesn't work for them. Other things are working for them. So even like to peel back all this, like, you know, sometimes you can have kids who have learned to conform because they are scared of punishment and they don't
or consequences.
No, I'm like thinking even outside of like,
because we're trying to get away from the punishment.
We are trying to get away from punishment.
You're saying some people still think in terms of punishment.
Yes.
Okay.
And we're trying to get this balanced out.
Yeah.
Is that sometimes in homes you have things that are working good, but it is a punishment culture.
Okay. Right.
And kids are afraid. And then usually you don't see the rebellion and stuff come out of them until later when they feel like they can
Depends on the child.
They can run away.
Yeah.
From it, or then they make vows in their heart and they say, I'm never going to do this to my family because of what it did to me. Or then you even have other people that are like, I'm going to keep doing this. So like I guess I'm trying to ask, like, what are some real clear things for people to take away? Because there is so much fear around, I don't want to hurt my kids and I do want to raise them right, but then I don't want to feel bad. And what is really love?
Okay, so here's one of the things, because you made a point about with the punishment, like people that their kids might be like, and they don't get spanked, but they might be still in fear because there's a punishment culture there.
Right.
Okay, so this brings up a great point. Our kids, I keep saying my kids, our kids, they feared the consequence of disobedience.
Yes.
They were not afraid of us.
But
they were not afraid of us. And they didn't grow up going, I'm never going to spank my children because my dad and my mom, they abused me and it was just so terrible. They're not saying that. If anything, they're going, wow, we see the difference it makes when you take a child and you discipline them and actually spank them when they're younger to deal with the rebellion. And so the difference isn't spanking or not spanking. The difference really is the punishment culture or not, which is what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's approaching how you're disciplining your children with consequence versus punishment. And if you can do something to where you can train your kids and you don't we don't just immediately go, when are we going to get to give them a spanking? Like we've never enjoyed that. If you enjoy that, you got something wrong with you. So it's not always the last resort, but it's not like, oh, let's spank them like that. We don't look at it like that. If there are other methods that are effective at dealing, not getting them to conform,
Right.
but getting them to obey and drive out the rebellion. If you can find other methods, I'm all for that. But the problem is that I've seen is that people, they get their kids to conform on some level. So it kind of feels like obedience, and it might be on some level, but the rebellion is still there. And it's almost like it'll become dormant. If you have a kid that is pretty easygoing, we could have raised Kingston without spanking him. And we didn't spank him much. He didn't need very many. And we could have raised him without none. But I can tell you now, he's a much better man. He was a much better teenager, and he's a much better man now because we dealt with those little rebellion things that popped up when he was younger. So the issue isn't to spank or not to spank. The issue is, are you raising your kids with a punishment mentality or not? Mm-hmm. And if you're raising them with this thing of like, you're going to be punished, and that term gets used, and I don't think parents always mean it that way, but I would say remove the punishment term, the terminology, replace it with, here are the consequences for your actions, but then what are you doing in your heart and in your motivation for dealing with them, for disciplining with them? Is it to try to just to get them to conform, or again, is it to try to drive the rebellion out of them? It has to be the latter. It has to be that you're dealing with the disobedience because it's tied to the rebellion, and that's what you have to deal with. I know I've said that in this podcast and the one before. We've said this 20 different ways, but that's the reasoning why you do it, is to deal with the rebellion. But then what's being communicated? Is it a punishment mindset, or are they reaping consequences for the actions that they've sown? So then another thing that you said is that, like, what if we have something else that's working? I say, great, go for it. I mean, but I'm just going to looking at the scriptures, and the scriptures literally teach us that the rod of correction drives rebellion or foolishness from the heart.
Right.
Of a
So
child.
we have to make sure.
So you have to make sure that issue is being dealt with regardless of what it looks like.
Right. Right. And making sure that we're not just trying to get our kids to conform to what it is that we want them to do, but really true obedience,
Because
heeding our voice.
We're not trying to control our children.
Right.
I mean, we might
That's
say
part
we need
of,
to get this situation under control.
Right. Punishment is control.
It is control.
Yeah.
That's right. It is control. Even it is more damaging to be controlling without spanking, way more than it ever could be to spank your child for the sake of consequence. Mm-hmm. When we control our children, we're teaching them that it's about us.
That's good.
Because we're saying, I don't like what you're doing. It's bothering me, or this isn't. Do what I tell you to do.
That's good.
But when you're training your child, you're literally training them, teaching them to deal with the issues of the heart, the inner things. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason why we have these outward things that we take to deal with the inward things.
Yeah. And getting them to really like try to think through and process through what's going on the inside of them, causing them to have things go on the outside, which is why we would need a consequence or something like that. We're out of self-control. And so we're trying to because that's a fruit of the spirit, of self-control.
Yeah.
But that is us basically positioning ourselves in a place of humility and obedience unto the Lord.
Yep.
And as parents, that's what we're wanting to do. Like, that is love, that is safety, that is security, that is freedom.
Yeah.
When we can be humble and obedient
Yeah.
to what it is that God is wanting us to do, because he's not a controlling God trying to get you to do what it is that he wants you to do, but he has plans and purposes that he has for you that are good,
Yeah.
that he does want you to make the choice.
Yes. And this is so good, because really what we're doing as parents is this could sound strange, but we're almost, when they're real little, we're almost acting as God to them, because that when they're real little, when they're 2, they don't even understand God, anything about God. They're just coming into that. And so in a sense, we're almost acting as God to them, because that's how they relate to God, is through us.
Right.
So then what are we doing? Are we teaching them that God is punishing? Are we teaching them that God is training to help them become free people, to enjoy their life and be productive in society and fall in love with him? Because that's what God does to us.
Right.
I've never had God punish me.
Never.
I've had him correct me. I've definitely had some spankings. I've definitely had him, tell me some really hard truths because of my dysfunction. But I've never had God punish me. He's never withheld love from me.
Yes.
And this is the thing.
I think that's huge.
We're going to get into this when we get into more of the nuts and bolts of how to actually spank a child. But you wrap that puppy in love, man. You love your kids well. Literally, physically love them well as you're doing it.
And punishment's outside of love.
It is. It is. They actually do not go together. Consequence and punishment is a counterfeit to consequence.
It's good. It's really good.
And so when punishment is involved, it pushes love out. When consequences are not involved, it doesn't invite love in.
So good.
That'll preach. Okay, we're going to get into this more on more episodes. So it's more good stuff to say. Thanks for tuning in to Family by Design. We're so thankful you took this time to listen and participate with Liz and I as we discuss these very important things concerning marriage and family. If you're blessed by this ministry, in particular this podcast, we'd love it if you would leave a review. It'll absolutely help boost our ratings and help other people to be able to find this podcast to bless them as well. We want to give a special thanks to our partners. Those of you that partner with Ward Ministries, you make this possible. If you'd like more information about partnership, you'd like to become a partner with us, you can go to wardmen.org and find all the information there, as well as other resources. So we bless you in the name of the Lord. Thanks for tuning in.